it up. Mr. Poilievre, 5-minute round.
Thank you very much for your good work. First question is, we saw testimony regarding luxury $4,000 per night escapes for prospective and previous donors to We. Is this what percentage of charities would you say offer this kind of luxury and expensive travel to donors, as We has apparently done in revelations before this committee?
I may be confused on that, but I believe that those trips were provided by me to We, the private business.
Interesting. And all right, that's very interesting to know. Regarding the contribution agreement, the Kielburgers claimed there was no way they could make any money. Yet the agreement specifically allows the We Charity Foundation to subcontract to a series of other organizations, including the Me to We for-profit enterprise. Do you believe that there's anything in the contribution agreement that would have prevented monies from flowing through the We Charity Foundation to a list of or other organizations that would be subcontracted and ultimately therefore benefit the Kielburgers?
Well, the agreement specifically laid out the possibility of money flowing to other We organizations. But I mean, I want to clarify. I mean, the Kielburgers said that there was going to be no financial benefit to We Charity, which is true. I mean, it is a charitable organization, and so there was going to be no, financial. They were not going to make a profit on this because that's not part of the charitable sector. But what it would allow is for them to maintain their staff, potentially grow their staff, maintain the charity at its current levels, if not grow it. So I mean, there was certainly a social benefit to having this contract, but clearly there was there's no such thing as a financial profit for a charity.
Well, of course, and I think the word profit is being used as a red herring here. Of course, you don't have to make a profit to make money. In fact, we all know people who have businesses that don't have any profit, but they personally do well, either by subcontracting to themselves, covering their expenses, or paying themselves salary, all of which is deducted from a would-be profit. And all of that would have been allowed by this contribution agreement. So the use of the word profit is a complete red herring. It tells us nothing about the ability of the Kielburgers or their related organizations to benefit from the contribution agreement. How many staff hours would the Charity Intelligence Group have spent to produce let's say the research it has published on We Charity in the last year?
So can you repeat the question?
How many hours would the Charity Intelligence Group have spent on research that produced the publications you've done on We Charity in the last year?
So just to do the update on July 6th, or whatever the date was, July 2020, it would have been about 2 days, so maybe 16 hours. But since then, and with all the media, and before then, it has been pretty much a lot.
Right.
A lot of the last week, a lot of the last month.
Sorry, to clarify, I just mean prior to, let's say prior to June of this year, what would you, how many hours would Charity Intelligence have spent researching information that you published on We in this calendar year?
On the research report, it wouldn't be much, maybe a day or two. Greg, the big work was on the impact analyst side. How many hours do you think the analyst spent?
Yeah, I mean, probably another additional 2 days on the impact assessment. So,
and that, what was the publication date on that?
That was back in, I believe, September of 2019.
Okay.
Last question, Pierre, go ahead.
Well, it's just extraordinary that in 3 or 4 days of work, with 3 or 4 employees total, you were able to produce all of this information when the Prime Minister's own department, the Privy Council office, was not, which has literally has 1,000 employees, was not able to produce the same information in a 2-week period during which the Prime Minister himself, the head of government, had supposedly asked for due diligence and scrutiny to occur. Due diligence and scrutiny being words he used in his own testimony. Question finale. On apprend aujourd'hui.
Last question. Today we learn that we had asked for nationals' help, the National Corporation, for their help to implement the program. This shows that we was not able to do things itself. According to your research on WE's activities, have you ever seen other examples where we would have managed a program with 40,000 volunteers and grants or subsidies or salaries to thank these same volunteers? Did we ever manage a program of such a scope that was proposed here in the contribution agreement between we and the Government of Canada?
Ms. Behan?
I hadn't seen. No, I mean, I'm just giving you context. The Fort McMurray fires, Canadian Red Cross deployed about 2,800 volunteers for that. So that would have been people in their network. The size of 40,000 volunteers, and maybe that's a better question for Volunteer Canada, because they would have better context of that number.
Okay, Mr.
Chair, if I could just clarify, I just want to see was there any evidence in your research of this organization that it had in the past deployed 40,000 youth volunteers and coordinated them and compensated them with honoraria?
A quick answer, Ms. Bain.
And we were looking at the WE days. We were looking at the WE school program. So not a service volunteer program like this.
Okay.
With a structure of a board of directors, staff, and a separate category called founders, who are also apparently receiving funds from the organization as something of a stipend. So in any context, have you seen a structure where founders play this kind of role, and where in the bylaws a founder can fire a board member?
No, when people believe in a charity, they serve at that charity and they serve as a director.
Okay, we will.
Okay, sorry.
Very quickly
Thank
then.
you. Well, I was just going to ask Mr. Thompson if he'd ever seen it. I know I never have, but I just wondered if there's any other charity where founders play a role in governance but don't have fiduciary duties as a board member would normally have.
Mr. Thompson?
Possibly at a very small charitable organization. I've probably seen this once, maybe twice at a very small charitable organization, but never when a charity becomes anywhere close to the size that WE charity was.
Okay, thank you all, Mr. Poilievre, and then Mr. Vaughan will wrap up.
Your efforts are solely focused on WE as an organization, but they're not focused on WE only. We've heard already today. Doctors Without Borders is an organization you've assessed. World Vision is on your website. Amnesty International, many charities. How are you able to come up with a judgment with such a limited staff and limited resources?
We value every program that every charity that we assess does. We take a look at all of the demonstrated results that a charity has. Take a look at every change that the charity claims to have made. Value that and determine for every dollar that is donated to a charity, what is the dollar value of impact that that is produced for the clients and for society. We're, yes, we're a very lean organization, but we're able to do that on the number of charities that we have assessed. We've assessed over 250 charities on demonstrated impact at this point, and we're continuing to expand that as resources allow. But we do it consistently and fairly.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. As a final point, I think I've gone over time, but just as a final point, I have nothing against you or the organization. So take this comment as just one of observation. It's hard for me to understand how an organization of 4 people can judge 250 organizations on a range of criteria, delve in and offer an enormous set of judgments. And for us to look at that as MPs is a challenge. I'll just put that on the record, but thank you very much.
Just to give you a list of the lineup, it'll be Mr. Cooper, Ms. Kotrakis, and then we'll be into 3 minutes for Mr. Fortin, Mr. Julian, and Ms. May, and then Mr. Poilievre, 5 minutes, and Mr. Vaughan, 5 minutes, and we'll wrap it up at that. That'll put us to 1:30 Ottawa time. Mr. Cooper, floor is yours, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Bain and Mr. Brown. And I guess picking up on where Mr. Fragoskatos left off, I find it rather remarkable that your organization of only 4 people with an annual revenue of short of $450,000 could identify all of the obvious red flags that seemingly avoided the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, even after the Prime Minister supposedly pushed back. But I'll leave it at that. I want to pick up where Mr. Cumming left off with respect to, or where he started at the beginning of his round with respect to bank covenants. He noted the misleading testimony of the Kielburgers with respect to their suggestion that they were only in breach for a short period of time, when that was not the case. Much the same as Mark, Kielburger misled the committee when he implied that Charity Intelligence had lost its charitable status for the entirety of 2012 as opposed to a day in 2012. But when we talk about banking covenants and a charitable organization being in breach of banking covenants, in your experience, Ms. Bain or Mr. Brown, how common is that, and how big of a red flag should that be?
Who wants to go? Ms. Bain? You're muted, Ms. Bain. You're mute.
Thank you. I've never seen it before in reading audited financial statements on over 780 charities before. So that bank covenant note was new to me. I did additional outside research into that, and I disclosed it on the report in August 2019. If I could just take the opportunity, when I worked at Burns Fry Research way back in the day when I was young, there was a team of 38 people in the research department, and our research controlled influenced 25% of the daily volume on the Toronto Stock Exchange. If you are a credit analyst for a Moody's or a Fitch, Standards & Poor's, a credit analyst assesses the credit on 100 organizations. So this type of small team doing research coverage is very common in other sectors.
Yes, thank you for that. And what would explain the breach of these banking covenants? Obviously, this was an organization with a lot of debt and few assets.
There was no additional information provided in the audited financial statements, but the bank had waived the covenants for the current period.
Yeah. Now, in terms of me to we versus we have on the one hand money that is flowing from me to we, the for-profit to the not-for-profit, but then we have money flowing from the not-for-profit to the for-profit. In your experience, how common is that? And what do you say in response to Kielburgers who say, look, you know, putting aside, and I recognize there is this issue between contributions and donations, but if you just put that aside, they nonetheless say that we still comes out on top. Do you see some red flags just in terms of the volume of transactions or the flow that is going from we, the not-for-profit, to the for-profit? It seems like a substantial amount has been flowing in that direction as opposed to the direction of the for-profit to the charitable entity.
Yeah, on that point about social enterprises, and as Mr. Julian would be aware with social enterprises are a sort of a new and innovative way for charities to work today. But the we situation is different, not so much because of its relationship with the social enterprise, but because the social enterprise is private and the social enterprise is owned by a different entity. Typically, the social enterprise is owned by the same charity. It's an operating subsidiary rather than being a separate entity. And I think in every other case where we have seen charities that have social enterprises, that social enterprise is public. And so it wouldn't be privately controlled by individuals.
Okay, you got a very quick one, Michael, where I was loose in time before. Now I got to be tight on it. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I guess just to pick up on that point, so what you would be talking about is a sort of a flow through, so to speak, as opposed to the setup that we have with we and me to we, where there is no flow through, and you have instead the charity controlling the social enterprise, a handful of individuals. Do I have that right?
Yeah, you had that right. And there is so much confusion by Canadians, and there has been since we began research coverage about the relationship between We Charity and Me to We, and it was just very blurry. So our role was to write the information in common English so donors could understand how much of their donation was going to the private business.
Okay, thank you both. Ms. Koutrakis will be followed by Mr. Fortin. Ms. Koutrakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Ms. Bain and Mr. Thompson for your testimony before our committee this morning. Prior to having the privilege to serve my constituents and Canadians, I was in the retail financial services and investment profession for many years in a supervisory and leadership position. And if one of my investment advisors told me that he or she bought their client a country's or company's bonds that were paying out a good return and fit within the client's investment strategy, one of the key indicators that I would ask the advisor to confirm would be what the Standard & Poor's and Moody's ratings on that bond was. Much like how I would look at the ratings of a bond, I would imagine the federal government and its civil servants would and may have turned to Charity Intelligence to look at the ratings of charities that is considering to administer its programs. Looking at your rating system for We Charity and based on your own metrics available at the time that We Charity was being considered, and not the updated info you put out 3 weeks ago on July 10th, and the fact that the public service recommended them for a specific task, was it not reasonable to conclude that We Charity was in good standing based on your own ratings at the time?
That's an excellent point. And that's a point that our research team will be going through. Was there anything else we could have reported? Yes, we had the ratings and they looked at, we said, those objective measures like overhead costs and balance sheet items. And those showed